Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, EMV, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'm Carol Miller, Group Editor of today's Garden Center. Today, Retail Technology Consultant Jay Lombardi will walk you through the steps you need to take to meet the October 1st deadline for PCI compliance. Even smaller retailers like garden retailers are being required to process the new credit cards by October 1st. Jay will help you understand the rules, how they'll be applied, and what you need to do for the October deadline. Without any further ado, let's hear from Jay Lombardi.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jay Lombardi. I am affectionately known as the Queen of Green. I am the National Sales Manager at Soft Intelligence, and I am privileged today to present the information to you all on EMV. Okay. October 1st. So what's actually going to happen on October 1st of this year? Starting October 1st, our friends at MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and American Express are requiring that all merchants accept EMV Smart Chip credit cards. Now, you guys can't see me right now, but I am putting quotes in the air around the word requiring. The first question one might reasonably ask is, what exactly is EMV? EMV stands for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa. EMV is a global standard that has been developed all over the world, especially in Europe. If you've traveled overseas at all in the last few years, you may have even had trouble using a regular credit card because the standard in everywhere except the U.S. has been these EMV Smart Chip cards. EMV is a credit card equipped with a computer chip. That computer chip is using technology to authenticate your credit card transactions. Basically, it's just taking credit card security to a whole new level. Over the next few months, you're going to see a lot of different names used for EMV. Probably the one that I've heard the most so far is a smart card or a smart chip credit card, a chip-enabled smart card. Sometimes these are called chip and choice cards. They can be used with a pen or a signature. I'm actually going to talk about that more in a few minutes. EMV Smart Card, EMV Card, those are all names for exactly the same thing, which is credit cards that have that built-in chip. Some of you have probably already started to receive new credit cards from your banks, and you'll see that there's a pretty little gold symbol. It's actually a computer chip on your credit card. So why the need for the change, besides the fact that the whole world is doing it but us? The year 2014 could very rightly be dubbed the year of the breach. There was credit card fraud on a massive basis that occurred last year to a ton of retailers. Two of the most famous are Target and Home Depot, but you might be surprised to see a few of these names on the list. Michael's, Goodwill, P.F. Chang's, Jimmy John's, Dairy Queen, Neiman Marcus, all of them had credit card breaches. If you took just these 8 companies, the credit card fraud transactions that were stolen were in excess of 750 million transactions. That's a whole lot of credit card fraud. And because of that, MasterCard and Visa have finally decided that, that we need to join the rest of the world and start taking smart chip credit cards. There is another reason why this whole change is happening, and this is actually pretty important to my retailers. One of the biggest reasons why our friends at MasterCard and Visa are doing this, or making this change, is they're doing it to shift the liability from the banks and the credit card processors onto the backs of the retailers. And honestly, that's why so many of you are listening today. Today, if an in-store transaction is conducted with a Confederate or a stolen credit card number, if information gets compromised, the consumer losses from that transaction goes back to the payment processor or the issuing bank. Depends a little bit on the terms of the credit card itself. Starting October 1st, that's the deadline that we're talking about. Starting October 1st, MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and American Express are now going to shift the liability to the EMV least compliant party in the fraudulent transaction. And that least compliant party is the phrase that we're going to talk about for a few minutes. So what does least compliant party actually mean? Well, here's your 3 ifs. Starting October 1st, if a consumer presents you with a smart chip credit card, and if you swipe the credit card instead of processing it as an EMV. By the way, just because people are getting new credit cards, if you guys look at the backs of your credit cards, you'll see that that magnetic strip is still on the card. So if they present you with a smart chip card and if you swipe it, just like we do now, and if the retailer is breached, then that means the retailer can be held 100% responsible for all fraudulent transactions. That includes fines and penalties, and the whole thing just gets ugly. That assumes, since the consumer presented you with a smart chip credit card, that the bank was compliant, and it also assumes that your processor can process the smart chip credit cards. Here's the bottom line and what I want everyone to take away from today's conversation. The cost of all credit card fraud is being shifted from the banks and the processors to the retailers. Doesn't matter your size. You can be a small garden center doing $100,000 a year. You can be Target doing billions of dollars a year. But all that fraud is now being shifted to the retailer. That shift is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while for everyone to meet all the rules so that they're fully compliant, the banks, the processors. But while all of that is happening, and it's not going to happen overnight, it's going to take a little bit of time. In the next, I estimate, about 24 months, the retailers are the ones who are going to start to be held responsible for credit card fraud. It's a very unpleasant change. So what actually makes EMV so secure? Well, quite frankly, it's that chip. The magnetic stripe on a credit card and a debit card contains static information. It has information that never changes. Whoever gains access to that data has the cardholder's information and can make other purchases. That's what makes traditional credit cards such big targets for counterfeiters. A thief can easily replicate the data over and over again because it never changes. Unlike a magnetic stripe, every single time an EMV card is used for payments, the card chip is actually creating a unique transaction code that can't be used again. You can almost think of it like a gift card. Once a gift card has been used, that number can't be used anymore. There's no more dollars on it. It's kind of the same principle. So it's that chip that makes everything so cool about EMV cards. If a hacker had stolen chip information from a retailer's point-of-sale system, like what happened at Target, card duplication would never work. The stolen transaction number created in that instance would simply be unusable because it would simply come up as declined because that number has already been used. It's kind of checked off the list. Fraudulent charges in countries that have implemented EMV, kind of like they have in Europe, have dropped by about 63%. I know that we're getting a couple of questions, so let me just take a pause right here and let Carol ask me some of the questions.
Okay, we have a question from Wally at Wingards. He wants to know, how will the card not present be handled for call-in orders and online sales orders? Apparently they do quite a bit of that at Wingards.
That's absolutely a great question. There are no new rules for card not present yet. I do expect at some point they are going to do something about that because card not present is the fastest growing credit card fraud area as more and more people implement EMV. Most all the garden centers that I've worked with over the last 15 or so years at some point get a credit card number over the phone. Somebody calls in to pay for a landscaping job. Somebody calls in to have soil or mulch delivered, and they're giving them a credit card number over the phone. My best advice to retailers is at the point that you're taking that number over the phone, you really shouldn't be writing it down. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a garden center and have literally seen scraps of paper all over people's desks with credit card numbers, names and addresses, that 3-digit code that we call CVV. The best thing to do is when you take that information is to punch it in directly to your credit card machine. So, for example, most EMV compliant equipment have a keypad on them, so you can actually type the number directly in. That way you're not taking the number down anywhere, and it's going directly through the device to start with. You do need to be careful with card not present. You are responsible when you take somebody's credit card number over the phone that no one else is going to get access to it. But as far as additional rules are concerned, there's no new rules right now. I do expect some other things to happen from a technology standpoint, but that's several years away.
I do have another question. This one's from Paige. She's asking, will the EMV cards have a magnetic strip as well, and will it be secured as an EMV chip card, even though, if the merchant is EMV compliant, but you're using the strip? And that's from Paige.
So this is a great question, and this goes into something that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But to answer the question, all EMV smart chip credit cards that are being issued in the U.S. still have a magnetic stripe on them. So anytime that you guys are getting new credit cards from your credit card companies with this new technology, if you look at the back of the cards, you'll see the mag stripe is still there. Paige, if you give me just a few minutes, I am going to answer your question in a little more detail, a few slides down, but I will definitely reference what you just asked me. So, moving on. A typical EMV transaction is going to work something like this. And if I had the technical smarts, I'd be playing the music to Mission Impossible right now, because I think this part of what's happening is so cool. The consumer is going to insert their card into an EMV reader. That's called card dipping, by the way, and they're going to leave their card in the machine. This is one of those things that's different than what we do right now. Right now we take the card, we do a very fluid swipe of the card. But with EMV, we're actually going to insert the card and we're going to leave it in the machine for a few seconds while you're processing the credit card. The EMV reader is actually powered by that hidden chip, and it allows it to communicate an encrypted, it's a code, it's called a cryptogram, and it sends that cryptogram actually to the processing host for verification. Your processing host decrypts that information, verifies the EMV chip, and then returns an authorization cryptogram allowing the transaction. And that's what's actually going back and forth, is these cryptograms, which is completely different than your credit card numbers flying all over the place. An EMV chip takes a pin or a signature, and that's what it uses to make sure that the transactions are valid. And this is creating the only globally accepted two-factor authentication. So this is what the whole world is using to cut down on credit card fraud, to keep people from stealing their information. So are these credit cards, our EMV smart chip credit cards, actually more secure? Well, they absolutely are, and that's the good news. So that's part of the good of this, is these cards are more secure. The two ways that you get to process an EMV card is EMV and signature. So very much like right now, you swipe the card and then you sign something. It's going to be the same thing with EMV. You're going to dip the card and then you're going to sign something. This method relies on CMV. We have lots of, we talk in lots of initials here, but CMV stands for Card Holder Verification Method. So what this means is that the person processing it is actually supposed to look at the credit card and make sure that the signatures match. People are better about that than they used to be, but I would say, you know, I use my credit cards often. My husband could testify, but probably only a third of the time or less is anybody actually looking at my signature. What the rest of the world does is they do EMV and PIN. So they dip their card, they type in a PIN, just like we do with our debit cards, and that's what they're using for their transactions. Debits are much more secure, PIN numbers are much more secure, and it is best when we go to that. The U.S. is not starting with PINs. They are starting with EMV and signatures. We will probably not switch over completely to EMV and PIN for another 2 to 3 years, maybe even longer. I'm a little disappointed in that personally, but for some reason I didn't get a vote when it came to this. Carol has, I think I have some more questions.
All right, we have someone who's asking about, and I know a lot of people feel this way, most retailers have credit card readers where the customer scans the card themselves. With that in mind, how can a retailer be held liable if a customer swipes rather than dips?
How can they be held liable? Well, unfortunately, they can be held liable because MasterCard and Visa have created the rules, not the retailer. One of the things that's going to happen come October 1st is the nice thing for all of us is this is happening all over America. It's not just happening to our to my garden centers. So everyone is going to start to use these cards. And is it going to take everybody a little bit of time to get used to the fact that they're dipping a card now instead of swiping? It absolutely is. And one of the things I'm going to address is some of the internal training that you need to do with your staff and with your customers, quite frankly, to get them used to this. The one thing that we can all be grateful for is they did not make May 1st the deadline for this. They did it in October instead of May. That would have been quite unpleasant for my garden center. One more question?
Yes, we have one more question. When you say the signature must be verified, what exactly does that mean? Do you have to see the ID for anybody who's using it?
When you get a credit card from your bank, you have the option of doing one of a couple of things. You can choose not to sign it at all. That's actually a bad idea, but people do that. You can write CID, so that when you give somebody the credit card, you're telling them they're supposed to be checking your driver's license, some sort of form of identification, or you can just sign the credit card. What cardholder verification means is that the person who is checking your signature should be checking it against either your credit card or a form of identification. It's not something that the credit card machine can enforce. It's something your point of sale clerks have to do. And so that's kind of the hole in cardholder verification is now we're relying on humans to do something, which is why I'm disappointed we didn't start by going EMV and PIN. I just think that's more secure. Yes, Carol?
There is one more question. This is asking for a little bit more clarification. Is if it's not swiped, how is the EMV card processed?
If it's not swiped as in if somebody is calling in for a card?
No, if you're using a card at a garden center and traditionally you swipe a card, how is the EMV different than that? And I've gone over it, but if you'll clarify a little bit more.
No problem. So when we swipe a credit card, that magnetic strip is being read. As part of what's in that magnetic strip is your credit card number, your name, the expiration date, and the CVV code are all embedded in that magnetic strip. So what happens is when I swipe my credit card, it's reading all the information that's been embedded in that slip. In that strip, excuse me. When I dip my credit card, when I have it read my smart chip instead of the magnetic swipe, instead of reading all my personal information, what it's reading is a code, and that code is getting sent to the processor. The processor knows all the information behind the code, who I am, my credit card limits, who to charge my charges to, and then sends a verification code back to my credit card and actually is changing the information on the chip. So the chip information is not stagnant information. It's being changed every time the credit card is being processed. That's the big difference between the two kinds of cards. Does that help?
All right, I do have one more question. We have a lot on this one. You've caught everybody's attention. Is there an amount that the retailer is liable up to? Like, is it always 100%? And will the what if the system is down? So two questions: liability amounts, and then are you still liable if your system is down?
I have seen nothing that says that there is any sort of limit as far as the liability amounts that the retailer can be held responsible for. I don't know if there's a limit. To be honest, I have seen absolutely nothing that says that. So I'm going to err on the side of caution and say I don't think there's a limit because I haven't seen anything that says that. And what is so unpleasant is what people have to remember is you're being held responsible not just for the $500 they spend at your store. If somebody steals information from you, they breach your system and they steal 500 credit card numbers, you're responsible for the transactions off of those 500 credit card numbers. It's not a matter of what happened at your store. It's that breach that you're being held responsible for. And that's what makes this so incredibly painful and important all at the same time, that the retailers understand exactly what they're going to be held responsible for. It is so incredibly important that you protect your data and you protect your customers. I'm sorry, the second half of that question was?
The second half of that was the, oh, sorry, I've already scrolled past that question. Sorry, let me go back to it. In the meantime, while I'm looking that up.
I know what it was.
Okay, go ahead.
They ask what happens if the system is down.
Right, yes.
Okay, so if your system is down, you have one of a couple of choices. Believe it or not, you can still call in to the credit card company and get an authorization. Some of my customers will actually keep dial-up equipment for when this kind of thing happens. But basically, you're not storing information anymore. All this information is happening live, and this is part of the shift to our internet world. Everything is happening live all the time, and the anticipation is, by the credit card companies, quite frankly, is that you're not going to go down. But from a backup standpoint, when you're down, if you're going to continue to take credit card numbers, you will be held responsible for those. I have some customers, when their system goes down, they'll manually write numbers down, and then they'll process them after the system comes up. At that point, they're self-insuring. That's a choice that people make. Some people will call into the credit card companies. Some people will pull out old Zon equipment that's attached to a fax line and actually process it through there. That's one of those questions that you need to address with the people who are processing your credit cards and or your point-of-sale vendor. So
Okay.
one more?
Yeah, one final question before we move on. I know there's others in the queue, but we'll need to move this on a little bit. Someone is asking that although it's not yet required by the U.S., if someone wants to use the chip and they have the reader for that, does it work at this point?
It works if it works inside your system. That may not be the best way of answering the question. There are a number of point-of-sale systems on the market today that can take an EMV credit card. Epicor, for example, is EMV compliant right now. If you are at an Epicor vendor and they have the EMV equipment and you have a smart chip credit card, you can process a credit card on their system. Systems like NCR Counterpoint and QuickBooks Point of Sale, for example, will be compliant by October 1st, but are not compliant as of this moment. So whether or not you can process a card really has to do with the point-of-sale software and with the bank processing the transaction. Okay, so here's the $64 million question. Everybody wants to know whenever we talk about EMV. Jay, what is this going to cost? Well, you're going to love my answer, because maybe a little and maybe a lot, and it so depends. There are a number of factors I'm about to point out to you guys, so just listen to the end. The very first thing you need to do is you need to find out if your existing point-of-sale system is EMV compliant, or if it's going to be EMV compliant, if your point-of-sale company is going to make that version compliant. So to find out exactly what version you're running, in most systems, if you go to Help About, you can see what version of the software that you're running. And that's usually a piece of information that someone's going to ask you when you ask them this question. Once you know what version you're on, then you can ask your software provider if they're going to make that version compliant before October 1st. I just used the example of both Intuit for QuickBooks Point of Sale and NCR Counterpoint. Both companies have assured their customers that they will be EMV compliant by October 1st, and I have every reason to believe that they will both clearly make that deadline. So, but they're only going to do that for their current versions of the software, and that's one of the things that you need to take into consideration. So if you're running one of those products but you're running an old version, you probably need an upgrade. Upgrades come in two flavors. They come in simple upgrades and major upgrades. The next logical question is, what is the difference, Jay, between the two of them? Well, basically, upgrades with all the software companies kind of work like this. Let's say that you're running QuickBooks Point of Sale version 9. The current version of QuickBooks Point of Sale is version 12. Well, those are 3 numbers apart, which means there have been 3 releases to QuickBooks that you have not put on your system. Our friends at Intuit are not going to go back and make QuickBooks Point of Sale version 9 EMV compliant. They're going to make version 12 EMV compliant, so that means you need to upgrade. When you are changing version numbers, when you're going from version 9 to version 10 to version 11 to version 12, that is typically a major upgrade. The more numbers you switch, the bigger the upgrade and the more consequences to your system. For example, equipment that runs under version 9 may not run under version 12. So that's when we talk about a simple upgrade or a major upgrade, that's kind of the difference between the two. Sometimes we'll continue to use Intuit for just a second. So QuickBooks Point of Sale version 12, it's actually version 12.1, version 12.1a. So it's altogether possible that there's a service pack that's going to take it to version 12.2. That's a service pack, and in many cases you can download that service pack and you can install it yourself. But this is one of those places where I'm going to caution everybody. There are tons of point-of-sale systems out there beyond the major players, and exactly how everyone works is a little bit different, and you all absolutely need to go back to your point-of-sale partner and you need to work with them to make sure that you're doing everything the way that it needs to be done. If you're on a system that will never be EMV compliant, like you're on QuickBooks version 9, then you need to make sure that you understand what the path is to get to the current product. It's altogether possible that you're on a product that's been completely discontinued. The company may even be out of business. So if there is no path to upgrade to the next product, then really it's time to look for a new point-of-sale system. Now, as I say that sentence, sitting in Cleveland, Ohio on April 7th, I kind of laugh. Absolutely no one in the green industry is going to think about replacing their point-of-sale system for the next 90 days. That's okay, but when you guys get done with season, if you're on a system that is never going to be EMV compliant, you need to make the decision to get your new point-of-sale system a higher priority for June than perhaps you would have preferred. Okay, another question from the audience. I'm sorry, Carol, I didn't hear you.
Sorry about that. Who is going to be supplying the equipment to process the EMV cards?
Oh, what a lovely question. So this is one of those places where the people supplying it there's a variety of answers for this. It's possible that your credit card processing company will give you new equipment. Underline the word possible. It's possible you're going to have to buy the equipment. It's possible you're going to have to buy it from your point-of-sale provider. It's possible that you can go on the open market and buy it. That answer varies tremendously with your individual point-of-sale product and with who your credit card processor is. Anytime you can get your credit card processor to pay for something, that's lovely. You certainly give them enough money every single year. So seeing if they will provide the equipment is not a bad idea to start with. But in most cases, my customers are having to buy the equipment. So whereas I'm a firm believer of ask and you shall receive, sometimes the answer to that is no, and then you just have to go buy it. One more question?
And this one actually leads in well to the very next part about the server. This is a person who is in a very remote area and can only send credit card info on a hard line. So what are their options there?
Oh, dear. Well, so if I was giving out an award for Stump the Speaker, they would get it. I actually don't know the answer to that. I have not read anything about the cryptograms working across a hard telephone line like that. Maybe they do, but so much of this subject has gone around the internet and sending the data there. I don't honestly know. But Carol, if you'll make sure that I know who that is, I will find out the answer and make sure they get that. That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that yet.
It would be collecting all the questions, even those who we don't have time to answer, and we'll be giving them to Jay, and she'll be answering those for everybody.
Okay. So the next thing that you have to consider in the EMV upgrade is, will your server support the new version? So if you have to change, if you have to update your point of sale system, are you going to need a new server? Are you running Windows Server 2003? 2003 was 12 years ago. That was a long time ago. So if you're running that system, you're probably going to be upgrading your server. You do have the option normally to either replace your server or to upgrade the operating system. I can tell you as a practical matter, most people will just deploy a new server. You can usually get 5 to 7 years out of a server, but at the point that you've gotten that use out of it, most people are looking to put in a brand new server. The other thing that happens is people deploy a new server because they need to keep running the old system. They'll put the new system on the new server, they'll continue to run their old point of sale system, and then at some point make the switch between the two, and that makes life a little more pleasant for everyone. What about your workstations? Your workstations, and by this I'm referring to both your point of sale workstations as well as your back office workstations. What operating system is the new system going to support? Here's something that I really want everybody to pay attention to. If you are running Windows XP, you are outside of PCI compliance. There are no more upgrades to XP, and any machine running XP should not be on a network that's processing credit cards. It actually shouldn't be on a network that's attached to the internet, but it should definitely not be on a network that is processing credit cards. They're just completely out of compliance. Which operating systems are going to work with your new software? Well, of course, that depends on your software. But you have Windows 7, Windows 8, we even have Windows 10 on the horizon. Once again, you need to work with your point-of-sale provider to make sure that you're upgrading all of your equipment to the appropriate versions. The next thing that you're going to need to do, and everybody is going to need to do this one, is you're going to actually need to buy or acquire the EMV equipment for your PC-based terminals. Everybody wants to know how much this is going to cost. Well, the devices seem to be hovering between $200 to $250 on the low end, up to $900 on the high end. The more things the devices do, the more the device costs. For example, if you're buying something where you can simply dip your credit card, that's a lot different than something that includes a signature capture, a customer display, a debit device, a point-to-point encryption. The more things that the devices do, the more they're going to cost. What ports are you going to be plugging the device into? Is the device going to be working across a wide area network? Do you have multiple stores that are connected via the cloud? That actually can change the type of device that you need, so you need to be careful. As you guys can see, it is very important while you're doing all of this that you continue to work with your point-of-sale partner. They should be walking you through this labyrinth. That's all that it can be. That's all that it can be called. I do have one thing that I want you guys all to know. Most point-of-sale companies are only certifying 1 or 2 devices to work with their system. Once again, companies like NCR Counterpoint, Epicor, QuickBooks Point of Sale, they're all certifying 1 or 2 EMV devices. So even though there's a large number of devices out there, it doesn't mean that every device is going to work with every single point of sale system. So you need to work with your partner to make sure you're getting the device that's actually going to work with the system that you're using. There is a new twist to EMV, and that is our mobile terminals. A lot of systems have some sort of a mobile component now. They're working either on some sort of an iDevice, an iPad, iPod, iPhone, an Android device, or another type of wireless device, a Symbol, Motorola. There's actually a pretty long list of devices you can use. So you're going to need to find out what kinds of devices are going to work with the equipment that you have. Devices for the EMV smart chip readers for a mobile device are less expensive, but then of course they're doing a lot less. They're actually just reading the chip. Those devices seem to be hovering in the $100 to $200 neighborhood. The difference is if you're going to put your device in a sled, for example, you're going to put your iPhone in a sled that has a scanner built into it along with a smart chip, you're going to pay a lot more for that sled than you would pay for just a device that you're going to plug into the phone to read a smart chip credit card. You need to make sure that you understand what mobile operating system is needed. You need to make sure that your device is included in the specifications. So, for example, iPhones. iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, which one is going to work? Do not assume that the most current version is going to work with anything. That's one of those things that you need to make sure that you're providing all the information to your point-of-sale partner and you're getting all the information in return. If you are going to work with a sled or another attached device, you need to make sure that there's enough slots on the device to plug everything in. Carol? Carol keeps muting herself.
Sorry about that. Is it required to use POS if you're on a cash register system, but you are taking credit card, you do process credit cards? How does all of this apply?
Yes, thank you. That's a lovely question. So yes, and forgive me, as most anybody who has met me knows, I sell retail point-of-sale systems. That's been my life for the last 25 years. So I always think in terms of point-of-sale, but yes, many of the garden centers are running cash registers. If you're running a cash register, what that means is just like now you have a separate credit card machine, you're going to have a separate credit card machine now that's going to take an EMV chip card. So you're not processing through the system, you're actually processing through what we call a ZON machine, a standalone device. You still need to comply with all the rules, but it does change some of the complexity because now you don't have to worry about your point-of-sale register, you don't have to worry about your server, operating systems, those things. You also don't get all the benefits of a point-of-sale system.
All right, we have another question. This is a fairly straightforward one. Will this allow for paper receipts to be printed out?
Oh, absolutely. This has nothing to do with paper receipts. Most point-of-sale systems at this point give you the option of emailing people receipts. Lots of benefits to that. It's a little greener to the planet. Obviously, you are getting your customer's email address when you do that. But yes, this has nothing to do with the printing of a receipt. It will still print a regular receipt for the customer. It's very, very much like the equipment that you guys see at any of the grocery stores, any of the box stores. It's exactly the same equipment.
And one more straightforward question is, how do you recognize that a card is an EMV card?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, if you look at my slides, you will notice on my slides that there is a picture of a credit card, and there's, in effect, there's a gold chip in the upper right-hand corner of all of the slides that when you look at the card, that's how you know whether or not there's a chip embedded in the card. The chip isn't actually that gold chip that you see. The chip's actually underneath that. But you can tell because right above the first 4 digits of the number is a gold chip, and that means that it's an EMV smart card. Okay, so here's the next thing. So this is just one of those things where I really want to give you guys all the information that you can possibly get, but I really want everyone out there to beware. Do not assume that you can just go purchase your EMV equipment on the open market. It's altogether possible. Amazon is not your friend in this case. In some cases, the software provider may have built in additional or special encryption into their software and into the devices that they're selling you. This means that if you just go on the open market and you buy something, it might not work with your software. So you want to make sure that you're working with your point-of-sale partner, and you want to make sure that you have all the facts. The best thing for anyone to do, and I've sold enough equipment over the years, is if you guys want to purchase your own equipment, make sure your point-of-sale partner knows that so that they can at least help you avoid making a painful mistake. I've had a couple of customers who have bought very expensive, very ugly Christmas tree ornaments because they went on the open market and they purchased devices that, even though they thought were exactly the same devices, they actually weren't. And I really don't want to see that happen to anyone. So just make sure that you're working with your point-of-sale partner. Get all the facts before you make a decision. Okay. So let's do a quick little recap here. First of all, at a minimum, you're going to need to buy and or get an EMV device for each of your point-of-sale terminals. And nobody likes these last 4 words, but I am going to say them anyway. And that includes your seasonal terminals. I know you guys don't want to do it for your seasonal terminals. You look at me with those plaintive eyes and you say, Jay, we only use them 3 weeks out of the year. We only use them 5 weekends out of the year. We don't really have to do it for those. My best advice is to go ahead and get a piece of equipment for every single terminal that you guys use. Having certain machines not be able to process that particular kind of credit card is just kind of a checkout nightmare. And so much of your money is made in such a short period of time, it's just not worth the extra hassle to have seasonal terminals where you can't take a smart chip credit card. That's my best advice. Y'all don't have to take it. It's just my advice. You may need to upgrade your hardware. You may need to upgrade your operating systems, both your network and your workstation and point-of-sale machines operating systems. You may need to upgrade your point-of-sale software. And in the very, very worst case, you may need to just get a whole new point-of-sale system in and of itself because the system you're on is just never going to work. These are the considerations that you guys have to take into account to get yourself EMV compliant. So I am going to give you guys this as your last additional option, and it actually dovetails quite nicely into the person just a minute ago who asked me about credit cards. You do have one other option, and that is you can process EMV transactions outside your point-of-sale system. I am by no stretch of the imagination recommending this. I don't even think it's a good idea, but it is an option. If you are running an old non-compliant point-of-sale system and you opt not to upgrade, you can purchase a standalone EMV system and process your EMV cards through that terminal. It's not unlike what you do when you're not processing your credit cards through your point-of-sale system if you have a standalone system. This isn't my recommendation, but it is an alternative. This one comes with a price. You're going to have more mistakes. It's going to take more time for you to balance every night. People are going to transpose numbers. Things are going to happen. Your staff will just take the card and they'll swipe it, not even realizing it's a smart card. The customer or your staff can do it. And the other thing about moving your credit cards outside your point-of-sale system is they just take longer at checkout. It's a minimum of an extra minute when you process credit cards outside your system. I've done some real interesting time study analysis for people over the years. I'd be happy to share that with anybody who wants to email me separately. But if you're taking credit cards outside of your system, there is a price for that. So I'm not recommending this, but I am letting you know that that is one of your options. You can just take your the EMV smart chips and you can process them outside of your point-of-sale system. Carol has a question for us.
Yes, I have a question from someone who is, they're saying they're a business-to-business organization, so they're not really using POS. They enter cards into SAP, and I have to admit I'm not sure what those initials mean. How will EMV work for this person?
So that is a card not present transaction. SAP is a very large, one of the largest accounting systems that you could purchase out there. So they've gone top of the line as far as that's concerned. But when you're doing card not present transactions, when you're taking credit cards over the phone, nothing is really changing. You're still entering those into a system. You're entering those manually into a system.
Okay. All right, and there's a clarification on an earlier question who was asking about being able to use the EMV reader now before we go compliant. They want to know if you can use the EMV plus the PIN at this point.
That question has a complicated answer. The answer is maybe, but probably not. Most of the banks most of the processors are not capable of processing with a PIN yet. So it's kind of a matter of whether or not the bank and the processor can do it. That really doesn't have anything to do with the point-of-sale system itself. That has to do with the processor who's getting the data, and most of them are not prepared yet to do chip and PIN. As an anecdotal story, I'm going to Ireland this summer, and I actually called my credit card company and I asked them for a chip and PIN credit card, because there are many places in Europe where that's all they'll take. You have to have a chip and PIN credit card or they won't take the credit card. Let's just say that I haven't gotten a credit card yet. That is not a request that anybody's been able to fulfill yet. So anyway, whether or not they can take a PIN number has to do with the bank who issued the credit card and with the processor, not with your point-of-sale company. And everything that I have seen thus far says that most of them are not ready for that. Okay, so Paige, 7-8 questions ago, asked me about the magnetic stripe and the EMV and the differences between the two and what was going to happen at checkout. And this is one of those things where this is going to require a little bit of patience and a little bit of training time with your staff and with your customers. To process a smart chip credit card, you have to do the following things. First of all, your point-of-sale clerk should look at the card before anybody touches the credit card machine. So right now, when I walk through the grocery store, for example, I just automatically swipe my credit card. Come October 1st, once I have a smart chip credit card, instead of swiping it, I need to insert it into that reader. So your clerk needs to say to people for at least a little while, oh, do you have one of the new smart chip credit cards? You can insert the card here. So they need to identify whether or not the credit card has a smart chip on it. If there is no smart chip on the card, the customer can swipe it, and no harm, no foul. If you're breached, it goes back to the bank, not to you, because the bank didn't issue a smart chip credit card. Once again, that goes back to that least compliant party rule. Once they identify that it is a smart chip card, the customer should insert the card into the card reader. It's usually a slot at the bottom of the machine. The next time you guys are at the grocery store, just look at the signature capture machines and you'll see that there's a place to put your credit cards. There's a place on almost all of those pieces of equipment where you can insert a credit card. But here's the trick. We're so used to swiping the credit card. It's like one fluid action. You know, I have a sign in my office that says, I don't have tennis elbow, I have Visa wrist, because we're all so used to swiping our credit cards. But really what happens now is they're going to insert that card and they're going to leave it there. So if they put the card in and just take it out, nothing's going to happen because it can't power the chip. It can't do the whole cryptogram thing, you know, hear the Mission Impossible music playing while it does it every single time. So they're going to insert the card and they're going to have to leave it there. And then they're going to have to follow the directions. The directions, for the most part, come October are going to be please sign. But it might be at some point it's going to start to say, please enter your PIN number. So there'll be some sort of a prompt, a customer prompt on the terminal after that. Then when the transaction is completed, they either entered a key, they either keyed in their PIN number or they signed the device, they get a receipt, you email them a receipt, you send them on their way just like they did before. There's going to be a little bit of transition come October, November, December, January. I figure it's probably going to take everybody 3 to 4 months to get really comfortable with this once they have a card, but everybody will get it. I think this just requires a little bit of patience on everybody's part and really work with your point-of-sale clerks to be especially kind. Whenever I'm working with someone who is older than I am, and I'm not exactly young these days, but I always pretend like I'm talking to my grandmother, and if my grandmother was going through this, how would I explain it patiently to her? Because that's what they're going to do. They're going to explain it again and again. So EMV is one of those subjects that falls under the heading of PCI compliance, and I will be absolutely brutally honest with everybody listening to this call. I don't care about PCI compliance, and here's why I don't care. Every single one of those companies that was breached in my second slide, every single one of those companies were PCI compliant. There were thieves who broke into their system, who broke the law and broke the rules to steal from them. PCI compliance does not protect you from really bad people who steal from you. What does protect you and protect your customers' data is the fact that you are taking all the steps that you need to make your system secure. I would have a whole lot less trouble with this whole conversation if the focus of the conversation was protecting my retailers and protecting my retailers' customers. So what else can you do in addition to starting to take these smart chip credit cards, which quite frankly you're being required to do? Under no circumstances should you be using any sort of an unencrypted MSR. How do we know whether or not it's unencrypted, Jay? It's really simple. Go into Notepad. Pull up Notepad. Every single Windows operating system has it. Take your credit card and swipe it on your MSR. And if you can read the information on that credit card, you are using an unencrypted MSR. Unplug that MSR and get an encrypted MSR. That is the easiest thing that you guys can do. It won't cost you hardly any money. If at all possible, go to point-to-point encryption. Point-to-point encryption on the magnetic card readers actually mean that the data is never available for anyone to steal, and that's the key. Encrypted is good. Point-to-point encryption is 10, 100, 1,000 times better, because now you have truly protected yourself and your customers. If you are running any machines running XP, sunset those puppies and get them off your system. Make sure that you install a retail-grade firewall. A retail-grade firewall is one that you paid more than $50 for at OfficeMax. A retail-grade firewall has an annual update that you're paying for, and it's usually a couple of $100. But you should have a firewall that's being updated. It should be a firewall appliance, and there should be an annual fee to update that machine. Make sure that you're running good antivirus software, and this list does not include anything that is free. Quite frankly, if it's free, it's a four-letter word that started with F. That is not good antivirus software. You should be paying an annual fee for your antivirus software, just like you do for your firewall, and it needs to be decent software. Last but not least, and this is one of the hardest ones for everyone to wrap their mind around, but write a policy on Internet usage and actually enforce it. Don't let people sit at your point-of-sale machine and surf the Internet. And I've walked into a lot of garden centers over the last 15 years and seen a lot of strange things going on. That should absolutely, positively never happen. So here's a fun set of facts for everyone, and I appreciate the fact that we're down to 5 minutes here. There are approximately 1 million EMV cards that were issued last year. There are 1.2 billion cards that are going to be issued this year. 13 million retail point-of-sale systems need to be upgraded to be PCI compliant. I want you all to know that that ensures my employment for the next 12 months. 40% of all U.S. debit cards issued this year will be EMV cards, so your debit cards, just like your credit cards, are going to start to be smart. 70% of all the U.S. credit cards issued this year will be smart chip credit cards. So you can see just in those two numbers that there's a decent percentage that is not going to be EMV yet. So you bear that in mind. 86% of all the financial institutions, the people who actually issue the credit cards, will have EMV debit cards out in the next 2 years. It costs about $3.50 to issue an EMV card, and the average cost of an EMV terminal is around $500. Unfortunately, that average doesn't really mean anything. You might be able to use a $200 piece of equipment, or you might need the $900 piece of equipment. That just depends on what you're running. This is a good time. We have just a few minutes to ask just a couple more questions. I did have some questions, but I think most everybody has asked everything that's on my frequently asked questions slide already. Carol, do we have anything else that anybody would like to know?
We have a lot of questions, not enough.
A lot of questions.
Someone is asking about, you mentioned in the the facts just a couple minutes ago about the debit cards.
Uh-huh.
So if a customer comes in with a debit card with a chip, are they going to be using the PIN in that case?
Yes, they are. So the debit card and the PIN chip, the debit card and the PIN technology is already in place, and so that will continue to work just like it has. It's the credit cards and the PINs that the banks have not accounted for yet.
Okay, another question, actually I would say multiple question for those who are in more remote areas. There's quite a bit of alarm about the phone line credit card. So do you have anything else that you can add on that?
I don't, and I apologize for not knowing the answer to that. I will absolutely, I will dot that I for everyone and get them that information. I just don't know, and I don't want to guess.
Right. All right. Sorry, there's a lot of questions I'm scrolling through here, so I'm trying to pick
Well,
one.
do me a favor, show the next slide so that I can say my last little piece. So the $64 million question is, what actually is going to happen October 1st of this year? And the answer is absolutely nothing. Here's what you guys need to know is, even though MasterCard and Visa have given us this October 1st deadline, and I am encouraging all of my customers to be as compliant as possible come October 1st, the reality is not everybody coming into the store is going to have a smart chip credit card. Not all the banks are going to be able to process smart chip credit cards. Not all the processors are going to be able to take smart chip credit cards. This is actually a process that's going to occur over the next, I'm going to say, 16 to 18 months. You guys probably have about a year to prepare for this. But what you need to remember is what the rule is. The least compliant party is going to be responsible. So the sooner you get compliant, the better. Please do not call your point-of-sale provider on September 1st and say, oh, we need to upgrade our system. Remember, there are 13 million point-of-sale systems that need to be upgraded, and a lot of people, we are already scheduling our upgrade work for August and September right now. So people are already standing in line for those particular slots. So your chances of getting it done at the last minute are pretty much non-existent if you wait to the last minute. However, nothing bad is going to happen. You're going to still be able to take credit cards. You're going to still be able to collect your customers' money. But these are all the things that you guys need to have a plan for. And even if you are not going to be ready for every single one of these things that I've discussed on October 1st, just have a plan for when you're going to be ready and make sure that you can get it implemented within about 6 months of October 1st. You just want to protect yourself. And the easiest thing that you all can do is make sure you have a good firewall, make sure you have good security on your network, and good antivirus software. And that's one of the best things you can do to protect yourself right now that will cost you the least amount of money to implement. Once again, protect your business, protect your customers' data. My name is Jay Lombardi. I am the Queen of Green, the Princess of Point of Sale. I am the National Sales Manager at Soft Intelligence. My email address is j@softintelligence.com. Please send me an email. My telephone number is on the screen along with my extension. Y'all are welcome to call me. Many people over the years have reached out to me. I've been writing for Today's Garden Center for about 7 years now. And so I get a lot of questions about a lot of different things. Y'all are welcome to contact me at any time. Carol?
All right, well, thank you very much, Jay. We really appreciate this. Thank you very much for